What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with another vintage Kenner Star Wars market update, and we're taking a look at mint on cards, everything from early 12 backs all the way through to the Droids line, kind of all over the map with this video in terms of the items I covered. Some buy it now, some auctions, but I just wanted to kind of go through some recent sales here. There were some good deals out there, and just like always, it's kind of sporadic. Some things sell for a lot higher than I expected, but other ones kind of sneak underneath the radar, and you might find some good deals right now. So let's take a look at this seller. I've never bought from this seller before, Heavenly Couture, but they always seem to have Star Wars every so often. And in this case, they had some beautiful 12 backs. This was the Farm Boy punched example, no price sticker. That blister was in really good shape, and this one did sell in an auction on Saturday for $3,388, and this one would grade very highly. One little issue on the back of the card here in the lower left-hand corner, but I think this would probably get an 80 grade overall, would be my guess on this one, and the price reflected that. And, the Luke inside the blister had not degraded whatsoever. I mean, it's a beautiful example with no kind of discoloration to the actual figure, so there you go. Very nice figure. So that was the first one that seller had. They also had an R2-D2 12 back, and this one sold for $888 in an auction. I think this is a 12C. Beautiful example, though, and really great shape as well. Another punched example with no price sticker. This one, I think, would grade very highly as well. So really, all of these would look like time capsule 12 backs. Here was the Vader. This was an unpunched example, no price sticker. That one sold for $1075. And again, a very, very high grade. One little corner ding, but I think all three of those would grade 80 or above. So beautiful examples for some 12 backs. Here was another 12 back. This one was from a different seller, and this one was in a buy it now situation, unpunched, no price sticker. Beautiful white-haired Ben Kenobi, and that one sold for $1,200. So the only question I had about this one is on the right-hand side, it looks like maybe the blister is starting to pull away, would be my guess there. So I don't know. You got to be careful on some of these. So you can see it right here as well. So, who knows what's going on with that one. It would just concern me enough that I would want to make sure to really look it over, or maybe ask for some better photos. But maybe the blister's kind of just peeling a little bit on that right-hand side. Could be a reseal. I don't think so, because this seller sells quite a bit on eBay. Probably just, a little bit of lift of the blister. And, we got to remember, these are 1977, 1978 figures. So, it just could have pulled away a little bit from the blister. Here was a rare one, and I didn't see this one, but this seller had this at auction, and this is the 7-inch Takara Chewbacca. Always very desirable. We've seen some high-grade examples, even low-grade examples, like AFA 60s and 70s go for big money. This one was still fully sealed, but it's a pretty fragile blister, kind of a weird blister style, and it did have some dings. It had that corner crunch, but it sold for $596, which I think is actually not a bad deal relative to some of the ones I've seen. Here's the back of it, and so they made Vader, C-3PO, Stormtrooper, and Chewbacca, and they're all very desirable. They all sell for big money. They're 7-inch in size, made in Japan by Takara. So, and there's some other kind of wonky items, like radio-controlled items. I don't know much about these Takara lines, but they've got some models and things like that. And but it's the C-3PO to me is my favorite. I just love the way that looks. It's kind of a very 70s style to all four of those figures. The Stormtrooper goes for big money as well. That's a very tough one to find. Chewbacca is usually I would say the Chewbacca and Vader are the two most common for these 7-inch figures, but the Chewbacca is also very cool. I mean, it's kind of wider, kind of I don't know, he's kind of a more of a monster look to it. It kind of almost looks like it would fit in a line with Godzilla and some of these other Japanese kind of icons, but a very, very cool figure and great packaging. I mean, that packaging is pretty awesome. So $596 on that one. And again, I've seen some AFA graded examples go for over $1,000 for some of those other characters. So just does not come up very regularly. Going back to the vintage Kenner line, we've got some ESBs now. This one was in rough shape, but this was a 31 back mint on card Boba Fett, and you can see how rough the card was. Let's see if we can find some better close-ups here. The card had, quite a bit of creasing to it. Blister was in fairly decent shape, although it had some kind of creasing there. But this one was listed for $1,500. And, this is a good close-up here. So you can see the creases on the card there. Very rough condition, but it was advertised as still mint on card, which I question given the issue over here on the left-hand side. It looks to me like it's pulling away from the card back there. But it was a 31 back, and it was listed for $1,500. The best offer accepted on that one was $900. So the seller came down quite a bit on that one. Here's another close-up of the blister. You can see where it's pulling away in the lower left-hand corner. So to me, it's not. I wouldn't pay $900 for it, but a true 31 back and higher grade is going to set you back, I don't know, probably $2,500 or so. So it's kind of a budget-friendly option, I guess. Next up was a 32 back Leia Organa, clear bubble, and it has some edge wear to the card. And this is probably, like, at best I'd say a 75 grade. It was clear blister. It did have a self-service. Let's see, who is this? Self-service catalog. I don't know who that is, but I vaguely remember them around for a brief time in my childhood. You'd have to, like, order it in a catalog and then drive to the store and pick it up at, like, this weird counter. It was just a very bizarre concept and not something that lasted very long. But it was kind of like a Sears, except there was no point of sale retail space. It was just like one counter, big warehouse. If you order it through the catalog, they would let you know when it's ready, and you'd go kind of drive by and pick it up. So this was that Leia Organa, and it was a unpunched example, but it had quite a bit of wear to it. I think it would grade at best like a 70 plus to 75, somewhere in that ballpark. Blister was in great shape, figure in great shape. That one sold at an auction for $311. So pretty inexpensive early Leia Bespin card back. This seller had some beauties that were graded. This was a 41 back C3PO AFA 80. I might have had this in a what to buy video. This was a punched example with a price sticker, and I said, hey, if you can get it for around that starting bid price of $650, I think it's worth it. And somebody's decided to bid on it. $650 plus $15 shipping. That's the price I'd pay for it, quite honestly. It's just harder to find the C3POs on the ESP card backs, and it was a very nice high grade, 285 subscores. So beautiful example, $650 for that one. And then the same seller had an AFA 75 Hoth Snowtrooper on the 48 back A. And this was unpunched, no price sticker. That one sold for $870, which seemed high to me. I could see that price for an AFA 75 debut card, like a 31 back. But for a 48 back A offerless, I mean, it certainly is awesome. I'm not trying to say that, but that is not nice. But for an AFA 75 for $870, that to me feels like an overpay. I think you could probably get that one for realistically more like $600 to me. But it does present very nicely though, without any price stickers, unpunched, and that's a really awesome card back. I mean, let's be honest, the Hoth Stormtrooper card back is one of the best in my opinion. Here was another Princess Leia. This was a Princess Leia Hoth on a 48 back offerless. It was starting to yellow as well, and that one did sell for $600. So is that a price I'd pay? Probably not. I think if it was clear blister, maybe in better shape. This is probably at best like a 75 with the edge wear and things like that to it. But it presents very nicely, but it very clearly is starting to yellow on the blister there. So Leia Hoths in general, though, are pretty expensive, even loose, complete, ungraded. I mean, you're talking $150 now for one of those. So, I mean, I guess there's worse ways to spend your money. It's a very nice figure, great card back as well. I've got this one on a 41A survival kit. So, but I would love to have this one on an offerless card back. It's a pretty iconic image and really presents nicely. So I can see the appeal. I've overspent on card backs that are way worse than this. So I think that's not too terrible of an overpay. Here was that survival kit 41 back A, and this one was for Han Solo Bespin, AFA 80. Now, it was not labeled as yellowed blister, so this is something you got to be really careful about, okay? It's labeled as card 75, blister 80, blister 85, figure 85 for an overall 80 score. But it's not labeled yellowed. But if you look at it, it's very clearly starting to yellow, okay? Now, it's sold in an auction for $695. And to me, anyway, it feels like an overpay given that it's a yellowed blister. But it is Han Solo. And, you know, any of the main characters on Empire Strikes Back card backs like this, you know, you're going to pay a little bit more for them. Do I think it's worth $700? Probably not. I think if it was a true clear blister, then yeah, I could see paying that unpunched. But given that it's starting to yellow and it's only going to get worse, I probably wouldn't pay $700 for that. But it certainly is an awesome card. That's another one I don't have mint on card. I don't even have one of these loose graded. So I need to pick up a Han Solo Bespin outfit at some point, whether it's loose graded or mint on card. But this is probably not what I would pay for it, but definitely is a pretty iconic card image there. Next up, I've got two different 77 back Boba Fett's. And so this one was really rough shape. And I was curious to see if it would sell, but it did sell at $720. That's about as budget-friendly as you can get for a mint-on-card Boba Fett with the alternate desert scene. So you can see how rough it is. This is like an AFA 40, 50, somewhere in there. But pretty cool to see that. So that was a 77A, slightly yellowed blister, sold for $720. And then we had the more heavily yellowed blister, AFA 75, that Brian's Toys had at auction that I showed in my What to Buy video a couple weeks back. So AFA 75 yellowed blister. This was more yellow than the Tatty card that I just showed you. It sold for $13.82. I think that's fair, quite honestly, for kind of a higher grade Boba Fett. It presents very nicely. No price sticker on there. It was a punched example. So $13.82. Now, you know, you got to remember that this was probably more like $1,800 to $2,000 easily this time last year. So I think that that's a pretty fair price, given that Boba Fett's mint on card have come down in price. Even some of the early cardbacks, they have come down in price a little bit. So if that's on your goal list for this year, now's a pretty good time to pick one up, because they got overinflated, right? You had the Book of Boba Fett, you had, you know, COVID prices, and all of that kind of combined to make mocks for Boba Fett very, very pricey. And while they are still very, very pricey, they definitely come back down a little bit. So $13.82 on that one. Next up, we've got a Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight. This was unpunched with a very heavily yellowed blister, but the card itself was in really great shape. Let's see if we can get some better photos here. This one was the 77A back. Very, very clean card. And this was sold by a trusted seller down in Australia that I bought from in the past. Beautiful, unpunched Luke Skywalker Jedi. And again, it was very heavily yellowed, but they almost always are, right? This one sold in an auction for $380 US, 565 Australian dollars. I think that's a really good deal, given that we've seen some that sell for $400 to $450 ungraded. And then here was another one. This one was this 79 back A, graded AFA 85, heavily yellowed blister, but a very clean example. That one sold for $1,099. So $1,099 on that one. That's a big number. I think I had a 79 back that I sold for like $650, $700 very recently. So this was a big number for a unpunched 79 back Luke Jedi. Next up is a made in Mexico Darth Vader. And so this is made in Mexico for the U.S. market. You can tell it's that because it's got the Made in Mexico label down there. It does have that little factory punch through the card. It's in the exact same spot that mine's in. I have one that's graded by AFA, and it's got that factory punch in the back of the card in the exact same spot on the of for Return of the Jedi. Now, this one was ungraded, but I think it would grade pretty high. It's got some very light edge wear to it, probably an AFA 80. But very clean. That one sold over in the UK, and it was listed for 450 pounds. It sold for 420 pounds, which is 534 US dollars. So those continue to command pretty big prices. And, you know, admittedly, I bought mine AFA 85, and I spent like close to $700. I don't remember the exact number. It was like 4 or 5 years ago too. So I spent a lot of money on mine, and you know, this one was ungraded and still sold for almost 600 US dollars. Next up was a Barada Power of the Force unpunched, and I sent this out to my Patreon supporters, and I do believe that one of them picked this up, and I think this was a good buy, a really good buy by Trent. This one was listed for 320 US dollars. It sold for 300, unpunched, and it only had very light yellowing to the blister. I mean, that is a really nice example for $300. That's a steal of a deal, in my opinion. I think it's going to grade very high. I think that'll grade an 80 all day long, if not quite a bit higher. I bet it gets at least an 80 plus. So congrats on that one, buddy. Next up, this one on the other end of the spectrum is this one. This was an ungraded Amanaman. Now, it's very nice. Don't get me wrong. Very, very clean. With, fairly moderate yellowing to it, but it was listed for 625 pounds, which is $800 US. That to me seems like a lot of money. That's not a price I'd pay. I think you can do better than that and get a better deal. But this one would grade pretty high, it looks like. I think it's a beautiful example, don't get me wrong. And Amanaman is not Barada, okay? I know that. You're going to be paying a lot more money for Amanaman than you are for some of these other last 17 characters, but that to me seems like a little bit high. I think in the U.S. this would probably sell closer to $600 versus $800. So, but don't get me wrong, it's a very nice example. Next up was R2-D2 pop-up lightsaber. This one did have quite a bit of wear to it. You can see some creasing at the top of the card. This is probably at best like a 70 plus, maybe a 75 if they're being generous with you. It's got some crunching or some creases on the lower portion on the back of the card as well. Probably overall a 70 would be my guess. It was also cracked, a cracked blister. So, maybe a 60 if you're going to keep it as is. My gut is that you probably keep it as is, send it into CAS for like preserve grading, and they would give some blister support to it to keep that crack from getting worse. So 1,009, it seems high to me. That's a high number given all the damage to the card back, but it is tough to find a clean one, and you're going to be paying more like $1,500 for one that doesn't have any issues with it. That's ungraded. And graded, I've seen as high as $1,800 even recently. So to me, that seems like a high number just given all the damage to it and the fact that it was cracked. But who knows? 1,009 on that one, 22 bids. So it was a beauty, and that one just sold on January 5th. Next up was an AFA 75 Luke Skywalker in his Stormtrooper disguise. That was listed for $1,700 US or $2,300 Canadian. The best offer accepted on that was $1,421 US dollars, which is $1,900 Canadian. Probably about right, quite honestly. I mean, anything mint on card, Power of the Force Luke Stormtrooper, or for that matter, the Tri-Logo version, you're going to be paying a lot of money for it. It's just a very, very expensive item, even an AFA 75. So pretty clean example overall. The scores were 75, 85, 85, archival case as well. So you're buying 285 sub-scores, and you're hopefully going to get a blister that doesn't yellow any further. So it was a beauty, but the final sales price on that, again, was $1,900 Canadian, which is $1,421 US dollars. And then finally, we've got a Tig From. This was mint on card, not graded, but it was beautiful. Really, really clean. It had one little issue in the upper right-hand corner there, some sticker residue that was kind of potentially, I think, the only concern is it said it was sticker residue. Okay. My concern with it and why I didn't send it out to my Patreon supporters is that I was worried it had color touch. So it could just be sticker residue, which is what the seller said. But I was thinking maybe it had some kind of blue ink that was added into it. You'd have to ask for better photos from the seller. But otherwise, it's super clean. I mean, if that's truly just sticker residue, then I think this was a good buy. It was listed for $1,000. It sold for $700. And I mean, Tig From loose, complete, ungraded with a coin can sell for that price. I mean, we've seen some in our loose, complete videos. So if that one didn't have any color touch up to it and you got that one for $700, that was a really good buy. And even if it did have color touch up, if you put it in a sliding acrylic case like it was, that's a nice addition given that, high grade examples can set you back quite a bit more than that. So anyway, I had a pretty wide gamut here, everything from 12-backs to the Droids line. I hope you enjoyed this look at recent sales on eBay. If you're new to the channel and you like these price guides, please consider subscribing. Thanks again for watching, and I'll be back soon.